Buffalo Bills get trucked by the Baltimore Ravens and Derrick Henry 35-10 on Sunday Night Football. We're going to discuss all that and more in this week's recap. I'm Circling the Wagons. Let's go.
To my friend Nate and all the listeners of this podcast, no one circles the wagons than Nate Escape. Circle the wagons, Buffalo.
Where else would you rather be than right here, right now?
Hey, hey, let's go Buffalo. Hey, hey, let's go Buffalo.
The Bills make me wanna jump.
Hey, Bills Mafia. Welcome to another episode of Circling the Wagons, a Buffalo fan base podcast. I am your host, Nate, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. I wish it was on better news. I wish it was a better game that we were discussing, but we are here to recap the Ravens' just absolute domination of the Buffalo Bills, 35-10 in Baltimore on Sunday Night Football. Lots to discuss. 3 primetime games in 4 weeks. A lot of things to discuss. Why the Bills lost. Was it really a close game? Did that trick play matter? Lots of fun discussions to have. But first, I'd like to welcome my co-host, John, to the podcast. John, it is so good to talk Bills with you, man. How you doing?
Doing good. Feels like it's been a while.
It's been a couple weeks, man. Glad to have you back. Glad we didn't record the night of. I got to be honest. When I'm staying up 11:30, and I do this thing, I don't know if you ever do this, where like as soon as you lay down on the couch to watch the game, like unless it's a close game, like you're done. Right? You're basically about to fall asleep right then and there, especially at our age. Like it's not quite the same. You have to either be sitting up straight, I feel like, or somewhat straight, or standing up, and then you have the energy to power through a podcast right after, you know?
I don't know. If I'm watching a Bills game, I can't lay down. Any other game, sure. and I might fall asleep during that game. But during the Bills game, I can't get to that point. There's just too much emotion.
So were you stressing into like the third quarter when the Ravens were up by like 3 scores?
I wasn't as stressed about this game than any other game, which is weird, but I think it's because I knew it was over way before it got to that point.
I want to say it was over. If you were to give a point in which the game was over, it had to have been that Derrick Henry run, right? The first handoff, 87-yard touchdown, right? The game was pretty much over.
Well, not exactly, but I mean,
it wasn't as you're watching the game. As you're watching the game, you're saying like, "Oh, the Bills can still come back and score." But looking back on it, I mean, that was the turning point of the game. Like there was the Bills not being able to score on their first drive, and then Henry coming back and scoring a touchdown the first handoff. I mean, it was like the Ravens never looked back after that.
I feel like the turning point of the game was before the game even started, by the Bills not having a good game plan on offense or defense.
Let's get right into it, John. John, you think so? I mean, if you're looking at this game, because I agree. I want to get to your point. I just think that like this game felt like you said, like the game plan. I feel like the Bills got out coached on both sides of the ball, and it almost felt like that Cincinnati Bengals playoff game a couple of years ago, where you're like, these guys didn't even show up to the game. You know what I mean?
Right. And it's a combination. They didn't execute well either. Like the Bills have been really good in the trenches on both sides of the ball up until this point, and that didn't happen either. So it was definitely a combination of things. But like from a defense standpoint, Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, and they didn't neither, right? Like they didn't stop either. And then offense, I don't know what happened. Like they're doing like a trick play when they finally start moving the ball at the beginning of the second half, and like what why are you doing? I don't know.
The trick play? Are you talking about the trick play specifically?
Well, yeah, but I mean, like the gameplay in general wasn't great, and there were drops too, which we haven't seen to date this season really. Kincaid and Coleman, they both had other receptions that were good, but obviously those stick out in your mind.
Yeah, it felt like, I mean, you mentioned the lines. I think one of the biggest reasons why the Bills lost was just domination by the Ravens on both lines, which is kind of crazy because the Ravens don't have a great offensive line and they were missing their left guard. So then they had to move their right tackle to left guard, and then they had to bring in someone to play right tackle. And from the outside looking in, you're like, this is a great setup for Greg Rousseau, for Von Miller to get to Lamar Jackson. And they just didn't really do that. I mean, there was a spark of life after halftime, like you mentioned, where like they stopped the Ravens and you're like, okay, the Bills went down and scored. Like, okay, like now they can start their comeback. But I mean, other than those few plays, there wasn't those couple of drives where the defense stopped the Ravens and then the Bills offense scored. Like there wasn't a ton of life besides that. There were glimpses of it, but yeah, they weren't able to stop obviously Derrick Henry. I think this game exposed a lot of their weaknesses that other teams weren't able to take advantage of. So you think about it, the Bills haven't played a really big bruising running back like Derrick Henry, and the Bills aren't made for big bruising running backs. They're made for speed. They're made for like the Dolphins, like A-Chain, Jeff Wilson, like those Raheem Mostert. They're made for like those kinds of offenses, not the big bruising Derrick Henry run down your face. I mean, the Bills are.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny you mentioned that because they looked awfully slow trying to chase down Derrick Henry on that first run.
They're made for speed, except they still can't catch up to Derrick Henry.
Right. And I mean, we got to remember too, they have two backup linebackers. They're one of the best nickel corners in the league is out. And then Taylor Rapp went down. I mean, there's only so much you can do from a personnel perspective. I'm not using that as an excuse. We already talked about the coaching and the execution, but it's just something else.
Yeah, that definitely. I think it exposed. When I said their weaknesses, is not only just like the way that the defense is set up, but also the injuries. This was a time. I mean, does this same sort of Ravens offense take advantage of the Bills defense with Milano, Bernard, Taron Johnson? Maybe, but maybe not quite to this extent, but that still doesn't help the offense. The offense was only able to score 10 points. That doesn't win you many games either. So I think on both sides, the Bills offense could not seem to block for Josh Allen very long whatsoever. Spencer Brown I don't think he allowed a pressure, or maybe only one pressure the first 3 games. He was getting beaten consistently. It felt like even Deion Dawkins, had some players, push him back. So this wasn't something that I think exposed a lot of, and I think that's also game plan. It's maybe they weren't up to it that night. A lot of things, that went into it. Personnel issues, and I mean, it's a good team that they play too. This wasn't,
Exactly.
the Dolphins without Tua, right? Like this is a good team.
Yeah, Ravens are a good team. Best team they played so far. Not to say the others weren't. I mean, people talk about like, oh, this team, couldn't beat a college team or whatever, but like, they're all in the NFL. They're all good players, right? For every team. What's that one statistic? It was like didn't they break a record recently, like 40-something games without losing by more than 6 points?
Yeah, the jinx record. Yeah, the jinx record that's never been brought up in the last 42 games, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, the Bills haven't lost a game by more than 6 points in a record, 42 straight or 44 straight.
That's pretty
games.
Impressive. Like how many years is that?
42 games. That's
3 years
almost
ago,
3
right?
seasons. Yeah, yep.
Or like when they.
I was literally at the last game that happened where they got
Colts
trounced.
Game?
It was the Colts game where they got run all over.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
Roughly 3 years, if you were 3 seasons. I'm sure they count, playoff games in that as well. I imagine.
I think they did. Yeah, so maybe it's 2 years, but either way.
Okay,
you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me put it to you this way, John. Knowing that the Bills are 3-1, I mean, we were thinking, Super Bowl, deep playoff run. I mean, this Bills team is special. The Bills get trounced, like absolutely manhandled. I mean, this wasn't a close game from the start. Does this change your outlook on the Bills season and what they could become?
No, not at all. But they're still going to win the division. They're still leading the division. It's better to have these types of games early than late. Going on runs late is better than going on long runs early, I think, as far as momentum is concerned, and game planning and, having all your T's crossed and I's dotted. I think I'm hoping the coaches learned a lot of good lessons out of this game to improve throughout the season. And, they have a new offense, new defensive coordinator. So it's good to get these things out of the way earlier than later.
Yeah, I agree. To me, it's not the end of the season. It's just a speed bump on the way to hopefully a deep playoff run for the Buffalo Bills. So I'm not as worried about it either. I just, it's not ideal, but how many teams are there in the NFL built like the Ravens that can do that to you in general? I feel like can't even think of another one, to be honest. I think
Ravens
they're
are
one of
very
the few.
unique.
And they're not unbeatable. It's just, you catch them at the right time like this. Catch them now, like you said, as opposed to in, the playoffs when they just trounce you like this and you're just like, well, on to 2025, like now's the time to do it for sure. I'm with you. I'm not negative whatsoever on this one. All right, let's go into stats of the game. Josh Allen, 16 for 29 for 180 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He did have that one fumble on that trick play. John, I've been seeing a lot of, I want to talk about that trick play real quick. I don't know if we're going to get to it later. A lot of folks on the national media and Bills fans, Bills Mafia on Twitter were saying that this was, that was a poor timed, play. That was not the right play. That's one of the major reasons why the Bills didn't win. And I kind of want your thoughts on this because to me, at least, it doesn't feel that way at all. I mean, they did have some momentum, and I think what fans are thinking is that that momentum would have continued into another scoring drive. But to me, I mean, even after that drive, and the Bills coughed it up, like the Bills still couldn't stop the Ravens offense. I think they only forced them to punt twice the entire game. I mean, this wasn't a defense that, sure, they looked better in the second half at the beginning, but after that fumble, I mean, I don't think it was caused by the fumble. I think that the Ravens just had their number, and I just don't think that the Bills had anything. Bobby Babich, the defense could stop the Ravens whatsoever. So I don't put so much on that play. Where do you put the blame on yesterday's outcome on that trick play? And mind you, we both love trick plays, so
I know that's what makes it so difficult. I agree with both. I think the Bills would have lost anyway, but I also think it was a terrible play call in that situation.
100% terrible play call. Terrible play call. I'm not ready to say that the Bills would have won had that play gone differently or whatever. I'm just not at that point. I don't think it does. I think if the Bills lost, you could say 24-10 or something to that point. I could definitely make an argument for it. Man, there was just like a drive off where, they score a touchdown and the Ravens don't score a touchdown off their fumble. Like that's definitely a possibility, but I don't see it that way. I mean, Josh Allen, had a rough game. James Cook didn't have a great game rushing, 9 attempts for 39 yards. Bills couldn't really rush the ball or pass the ball. Josh Allen, 5 carries for 21 yards. Khalil Shakir, leading receiver again, 4 receptions on 5 targets for 62 yards. Keon Coleman, 3 receptions on 4 targets for 51 yards. Dalton Kincaid, 5 receptions on 7 targets for 47 yards. Dalton Kincaid with that one drop on third down. That is a very uncommon drop for Dalton Kincaid. A guy who came out of college, had elite hands. He's up to this point, he's had really good hands. That's one of the first drops that I can remember. Reminded me of Dawson Knox back, his first 2 or 3 seasons, right? Right in third down, right in the hands, drop. It's not a great game by Bills pass catchers. Ty Johnson did have that rushing touchdown. That was a receiving touchdown. They have it here as a rushing touchdown. It was a rushing touchdown. Sorry. Lamar Jackson on the Ravens, 13 for 18, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Not asked to do a whole lot. I think it was something like 90% of his passes were at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. They didn't have to do anything to move the ball. I mean, they had Derrick Henry, leading rusher, 24 carries, 199 yards, 1 touchdown. He had the 87-yard touchdown. I mean, Lamar Jackson, 6 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown. Great game from Lamar Jackson. I mean, no matter what the Ravens threw at him, the Bills just didn't have answers defensively. Justice Hill was leading receiver for the Ravens. He had a great game, 6 receptions on 6 targets for 78 yards and a touchdown. I mean, we were just talking about, passes at or behind the line of scrimmage. I mean, that was almost every pass to their leading receiver, Justice Hill, at or behind. Yeah, that's of the game. Let's see this. Balin Spector recorded his first sack of his career against the Ravens last night. Khalil Shakir, his 52-yard reception marked his second longest catch of his career behind an 81-yard touchdown in Week 11 of last season against the Jets. So not a lot of great stats to talk about. I mean, that's was good. So John, I mean, that kind of leads us into our next segment, Sweet Sassy Molassy Plays of the Game. Now, John, I think I know what your Sweet Sassy Molassy play of the game is going to be, but I'm going to leave it up to you. What was your Sweet Sassy Molassy play of the game?
It's the Josh Allen roll out to the right, throwing as he's jumping out of bounds to Khalil Shakir for 52 yards. I saw a stat where in his career, like within 1 yard of the sideline, he's thrown for like, I don't know, something like 11 to 12 or 16 to 17, something crazy, 100 yards, 3 touchdowns. And while the rest of the NFL in the same time period is like 1 of 16 in the same situation. So it was just a great play and one of the very few good plays. So
yes. Yeah. I mean, I can't give it to any other play besides that. What a play. Unreal. I mean, evading 3 or 4 rushers. It felt like there were rushers running through the backfield all game, untouched or barely touched, just pushing the offensive lineman backwards. Yeah, that roll out to the right. I mean, it was just, he was only able to do it that one time because he was flushed out like 4 or 5 times. That was one of the few times that he didn't have to throw it away, or he found a receiver, or the receiver caught it or whatnot. Remember Keon Coleman dropped that one? It was right in his hands. It was rough. It was a rough one.
that hurt. He did have a couple other nice catches. So hopefully that'll be, more of those, unless it's the earlier one.
Yeah, you have to hope. I mean, he did redeem himself, but I mean, that would have been nice to do that in the beginning. So, yeah, it's got to be that 52-yard catch with Khalil Shakir, the one I mentioned earlier in stats. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot besides that. Honestly, like not a lot of even honorable mentions. Yeah, usually we have a lot more. Usually we have like last few weeks before this, we had like 3 or 4. It's hard to choose them. Well is dry, my friend. At least this game.
Oh, are you worried about next week? The Stephon Diggs revenge game?
It's in Houston too, right?
Yeah, of course it is.
Now, can I be honest? Like, I think the Texans are a good team. I don't think they're coached as well as the Ravens. I think the Texans, not that we're previewing this game, but I think the Texans have won 3 games relatively close, and I think that it could have easily gone the other way. I think Sean McDermott does really well against young quarterbacks defensively. I think Stephon Diggs will get his. Don't worry. I mean, I think it'll be 7-8 catches over 100 yards, touchdown. I think the Bills win this one though. I'm not nearly as worried as I was even in the Ravens game against a good team like this. I think that the Texans are a good team. Don't get me wrong, but they're definitely not coached as well as the Ravens. And
who do you think, like Bills aside, who do you think are the 3 best teams in the AFC, not counting the Bills?
I mean, it's still got to be the Chiefs. I mean, until you knock them off, it's still Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Even though Patrick Mahomes has now taken out his best receiver, that was rough. If it wasn't Rashee Rice, I'd feel really bad for him. But I've never seen a quarterback take out his own player in an interception, blow out his knee like that. Do we know? Is that a confirmed ACL? Do we know, or is it just a hyperextension?
I think they were going to do an MRI today, so I don't know.
But I mean, you can't not say the Chiefs just because they keep winning. I mean, that's what good teams do. Even if they're not as talented, even if they don't have as many good players in the field due to injuries or whatever, they find a way to win. And
so
the Chiefs,
second and third best.
Chiefs, Ravens, obviously now. But besides that, it is tough. I mean, do you give it to the Steelers? The Steelers just lost to the Colts. Colts aren't good. No one in our division scares me at all. Jeez, I mean, do you go Texans? I mean, the Texans might be it. What do you think?
That's what I'm getting at.
But it's not. But when I say the Texans, I'm not like they win it by default, as opposed to like they've earned it. Like they're a really good team.
And we have
like,
to play all 3 this year, and we're probably gonna have to play maybe a couple of those teams more than once in the playoffs. I'm guessing.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting. So, we could play all 3 teams again in the playoffs.
Yeah, but we're talking about even the Ravens, seeing the Ravens in the playoffs. I mean, that's not going to be the same next time, right? Like this is. I mean, it could be, but
yeah, sure. I mean, they'll get Bernard back. They'll get Taron Johnson back. Milano will be back. Nobody else will get injured. It'll be perfect.
Maybe Micah Hyde signs with the Bills. So after the Taylor Rapp concussion, like we're good at safety too.
Yeah, I forgot Taylor Rapp got hurt. Have you heard anything about Rapp or any of the? I know Shakir and McGovern both came back in.
I know Rapp is still in concussion protocol. He is definitely in concussion protocol, but I don't know, what stage or how long it'll be. Could he be back for the next game, or is it going to be game after? Not for nothing. And I like Taylor Rapp. I don't love him. I like him. Cole Bishop getting the start next to him might be like a blessing in disguise just to get reps. I mean, he might get, torch deep. I have no idea. That was supposed to be one of the areas that he just hadn't been tested a lot at Utah was, deep coverage. But for what it's worth, I mean, athletically, he's gifted athletically, size-wise, I mean, instinct-wise, pass coverage-wise, in the short to intermediate areas, it's good. So, but that's at the college level. We'll see what he can do, at the NFL.
Yeah, it'd be nice if he was starting. Assuming he's starting next week, it would be, I guess, a lesser team. What do you make of Mike Edwards not being inactive a few weeks in a row here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, do they take him off now? They almost have to. They have to if Rapp can't play this next week. I'm not sure. Maybe I think that they were maybe thinking to maybe put in more linebackers. I'm not quite sure. That is a good point. I hadn't really thought about that. So, I mean, what's funny is the Bills secondary has been doing so well. I haven't really questioned any of their decision making back there. So, and still, like, they didn't have a terrible game against the Ravens. It was just the run defense, really.
And that was the whole thing for the first 3 games. It's like, yeah, we'll let them run on us, right?
Yeah.
So, like, going into this game, I was really worried because their quarterback can run, their running backs can run, and even in the very first game, Kyler Murray can run, right? In the second half, they stopped doing that, so that kind of hurt the Cardinals, and we were able to come back. So, if you have a good running game and a good running quarterback that can also throw it, that's going to hurt the Bills.
Yeah, it will. That's just
unless they
not
can
as
get
common.
healthier at linebacker and in the secondary.
Yeah, I think this is again. I think this is a one game thing. I want to see more of these games strung together before I get truly worried. And again, a lot of teams aren't built like the Ravens, so I'm not really. I don't think that the Texans are built like the Ravens. I'm pretty sure Joe Mixon is injured right now, also, so that's even less reason to be worried about the Texans' run game. I think it's just stopping the pass, and I think the Bills still can do that. I think they have very good cornerbacks. So yeah, I mean, not to preview that one, but yeah, what's funny? We were talking about injuries just now. That Connor McGovern concussion protocol spotter or concussion spotter was weird, right? Like that felt unlike most games that we've watched where there's been like a guy going into the blue tent, then they come back out and they've never sent them back off the field to my knowledge that I've noticed.
I've never seen that before.
It's so weird. And I was just like, of course it's to the Bills, right? Like it's not like Lamar Jackson. Oh, they got to take him off and he's going to stay off. Like, no.
Well, I don't think Alec Anderson did a terrible job, in a pinch.
No, they all struggled. So he struggled as well.
No, yeah, there wasn't much difference. How about that?
There wasn't a huge drop off. Agreed. Dude, speaking of which, I got to share my screen on this one. What did you think? And I hate to be that guy. So we'll do Wall of Fame, Wall of Shame. This is my Wall of Shame for the game. I mean, just one of them, but like, dude, like this is one thing that was really frustrating during the game was these late hits and these liberties that they were letting the Ravens take on Josh Allen. Like here's the one we're watching where, Josh fumbled the ball and this number, and you can't help but think that like if that was Patrick Mahomes or somebody else, I feel like that's easily a penalty, a 15-yard penalty. And it's not just that. It's not just that play. There was a play where he slid and then he got, hit from the side, a guy diving in. There was that play with, I don't know if you remember that 4th and 1 where, they did, the tush push or whatever you want to call it. And then, someone rips off his helmet in the pile. And then, Roquan Smith tries to take he tries to use his helmet as a battering ram on Josh Allen's head and he misses him, It's like, I can't complain about the refs. I mean, they weren't terrible, but like there were some misses there. And if Josh Allen wasn't as big as he is, or like, had those gone a little bit differently, I mean, we might be talking about losing Josh Allen for this season. If those things had actually, affected the game. Do you notice that? Did you think about that? That crossed your mind?
Not really. Other than I did notice when his helmet came off on that 4th down play, but other than that, I didn't really Think about it too much.
All right, cool. Yeah, me either. I totally didn't think about that the entire time, or was putting together a highlight reel of all the dirty hits the Ravens made. But yeah, all right, let's go into Wall of Fame and Wall of Shame. John, let's start with the Wall of Fame. Who are you going to put on your Wall of Fame in this Bills loss? Can you put anyone on it?
No, I thought you were gonna say Wall of Shame first.
You were all ready for that. Throw a curveball. I threw a flea flicker at you. An ill-advised, mistimed flea flicker at you.
I probably had somebody in mind at some point today, but it eludes me.
Dude, what went right for the Bills that you could possibly point to, and you're like, well, that was good. You can even give it to Tyler Bass, right?
I don't like that was the thing. I could think of like, oh, he nailed that 50-yard field goal. About that, and then like on the 48-yarder, it was like a change of quarter, so he had all that time to think about it. It totally missed it. It's like, oh, great.
Yeah, he was.
No, I mean, even the special teams, there was like the bobbled punt, the missed field goal.
Doesn't that make you think like all three phases of the game, they looked poor? That feels less like a talent issue and more of like they went in on flat-footed. Like the game plan, the execution. It feels like everything was off, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, we lived through the drought where this happened every single game, and it was both coaching and players. But I think it's still both, but it's definitely more so coaching. I think the game plan was just really bad. But you still have to catch the punt. You still have to make the field goal. You still have to block. Like those things didn't happen either. So it's definitely both.
Yeah, I mean, Wall of Fame. There's no one on my Wall of Fame for this one. I mean, even the announcers stunk. Like they never looked once back at any of the hits that I mentioned or any of the penalties. We rarely saw replays of the penalties, the holding calls, like these weak holding calls on the Bills offensive linemen. The Ravens were one of the most penalized teams going into this game, and they were rarely penalized, even despite some holding or cut block on Ed Oliver and some other holds. It was there wasn't a whole lot of positive in this at all. The only I can't even say injuries because Taylor Rapp went down with an injury. Josh Allen got knocked around. I mean, that we didn't lose more than one starter to injury, I guess, is a good thing. But like you said, getting back some guys next week. I think the Wall of Fame would just be like next week. Hopefully we get back at least Terrell Bernard because I know he was practicing last week. Hopefully Taron Johnson starts practicing this week. So we get at least one of those guys back, if not two. But it's early in the week. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. So that's the only positive spin. John, Wall of Shame. I know you like to put multiple faces.
I feel like we talked about that during the Wall of Fame.
All we did was talk about Wall of Shame nominations.
The coach, the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator,
all the players, the offensive,
offensive line, defensive line.
Terry Pagula somehow. I'm sure he did something wrong. Stepped on his dog's tail. Freaking Terry Pagula. Yeah. Yeah, it was really close. So all right, let's go into. So those are Wall of Fame and Wall of Shame. Let's go into some hot takes from Bills Mafia. John, do you have a hot take before I share this one? Anything that you're like, yeah, this is.
I don't know if it's a hot take, but I still think the Bills are going to win the Super Bowl.
That is, dude. After last night, that's a hot take.
That's
a lot of people aren't saying that.
That's the Colt take. Everybody thinks that, right?
So I have a very small betting account that Mike and I started like 5 years ago on DraftKings or whenever we had it. And I texted him during the game. I'm like, the Bills are down 21-7. And it was like plus 800 for the money line, right? For the Bills to win it. I'm like, Mike, what do you think about betting $10 on this? Just for the Bills to win it outright. I was like, you win $85 or something like that, right? $80. And he's like, add a couple more zeros to that. And I said, do you mean to wait till it's like plus 8,000? And then we get paid like, 80 times what we bet? He's like, no, like bet our whole nut on it. Like our whole entire account on DraftKings towards that game at that point. And I'm like, that seems ridiculous. I don't think I'm going to do that. And I'm glad I didn't because I only bet $10 and, I
you
lost.
You can't lose what you don't put in the middle.
You can't. That's true. You can't lose. Yeah. Doesn't that also go the other way around? You can't win what you don't put in the middle too as well. So
well, it's, there's calculations involved.
It's cool. So let's go into some hot takes from Twitter. So if you're not following us on Twitter, please do. We are at CTW Pod on Twitter. We're that same handle on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, wherever you follow your social media platforms. I said the Bills lose to the Ravens by whatever, to big number to little number. What's your hot take on this loss? And Joel Franklin says Derrick Henry has our number. It happened with Tennessee. We couldn't game plan for both while we had injuries at linebacker. Loving my Dorian, but he's raw. Take away Henry touchdown, and it's 28-10. Give us a few more first downs, and we have a ball game. Listen, I like this take a lot. I think we have had issues with Joel Franklin, although if I remember correctly, I think the last time we played Henry in Tennessee, I think we held him to like 27 yards or something like that. But he has had our number in the past. I love Dorian Williams just like Joel does. I think he's raw too. I don't think he was the issue specifically last night, but I think, yeah, it definitely poked holes in it. I mean, they were saying Dorian Williams is leading tackler for the Buffalo Bills, and I think he's doing a great job this year. I don't think he was the issue. I mean, the defensive line wasn't slowing down Derrick Henry from just hitting the hole. If you notice that, like, how many times did Derrick Henry hit the line, have to like even pause for a moment to be like, okay, where am I going to go? He just took the ball and just hit it, right? Like Daquan Jones, like I love Daquan Jones. I think he's the best one-tech defensive tackle we've had on the Bills in the Sean McDermott era. He hasn't really been around this year. I haven't really noticed him. And I know his position isn't really a stat position where, you know, he gets a lot of pressures or sacks or tackles for losses. I haven't seen anything of anything. I remember watching him on replays where they showed Derrick Henry go through the middle. I mean, he was cutting through everyone to the point where they were replacing, you know, Daquan Jones with, was it Smoot? So Dwayne Smoot. So yeah, I think it's a lot more than Dorian Williams, but I mean, Dorian Williams didn't help, right?
Well, you know, so Milano was our leading tackler, and then Bernard was, and now we're down to our third guy. So that's part of the issue there.
Yeah.
And also, speaking of a few more first downs, they should have been going for it on fourth down more than they were. The first drive they went for on 4th and 1, then it's 4th and 2. They're like, oh, okay, we're good. And then there were other instances where it was 4th and 4 or less, and they didn't go for it, and they should have. I don't know.
You know, and I know you're definitely pro going for it on fourth down if it's like past your own 40, right? It's like you should be going for it, right? That's kind of your.
It does depend.
Fourth and manageable, at least.
Yeah, down and distance, and down obviously is fourth down. So distance and where you are in the field. Like if it's 4th and 15 on your 30, then all right, whatever. But most of these times I'm going for it, and I was saying this all throughout the drought too. McDermott's been better at it than previous Bills coaches, but I think there's still, especially when you're playing teams like this, when it's obvious that your defense isn't making any stops, you gotta do something. You gotta get more first downs. So you gotta go for it.
You gotta lean on your franchise quarterback, right? I mean, that's why you have him, so that you rely on him, not your defense.
And your offensive coordinator, and obviously maybe that could have been a factor, but I don't know. You gotta go for it.
Yeah, I agree with you. You do have to go for it more often than not, especially when you're losing. The only counterpoint I'll give to McDermott, and the reason why I don't pummel him too hard with not being aggressive, is that, I mean, if he was looking at the Bills offense, he's like, what's the Bills offense done? That gives me hope that they'll be able to make a 4th and manageable, or not get cough the ball up, on our own 40-yard line to, give the Ravens great field advantage. They just weren't clicking at that point. But then the counterpoint to that would be like, well, the defense wasn't doing anything either. So,
right. And maybe that's the spark you need too, like to continue. And then it's like giving up.
Yeah, it is. I guess I agree with that. It was so funny on that first drive. He went for it on 4th and 1 at his own 45 or something like that. And then they couldn't get the next first down. It was 4th and 2 at the Ravens 45 or something. He's like, nah, I'm not going to go for it. Ravens 40.
What? Yeah. It's like when it was third and 2, I'm like, oh, this is definitely 4 down territory. So they can play this down and then do whatever on the next down. And then they punted. I'm like, what just happened?
Yeah, that almost set the tone. And then right after that, the Derrick Henry touchdown run happened. So yeah, I agree. You know what? That's another good point. Maybe another person to put on the wall of shame specifically is Sean McDermott's aggressiveness or lack thereof in this one.
Yeah. And it's funny because the announcers are talking it up on the 4th and 1 call, and then they didn't talk about it again after he didn't go for it on the other 4th.
Yeah, they
Did he
didn't
go for it?
criticize
Did
him.
he
They
go
weren't
for it
like, I
again?
don't know why he didn't.
Yeah,
I
he
can't
did.
remember if he went
Maybe.
for it again. I don't think.
Did
Honestly, I
he?
don't think that they
Maybe
were
they
that
lost
close.
one too. I don't remember. It was a whirlwind of emotions and roller coasters of
It was just a lot of disappointment, waves and waves of disappointment. It's hard to remember
yeah.
which wave that was. So Karen hashtag Let's Go Buffalo says it was 4 poop emojis. I guess the L is outside of our division, so that's good. That's a good point. Guess they'll be going 16-1. John, you gotta love that. You gotta love that tweet.
On board.
Jamie D'Amico, our former podcast fellow podcast network associate, I guess you could call teammate when we were on Buffalo Rumblings with Jamie. Jamie says this is exactly what I feared this defense would look like without the crop of starters. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I wish I was in Buffalo at Saxa. Dave writes, maybe not exactly a hot take, but lining your star quarterback up at wide receiver and pitching it to him on the short side of the field whilst your O-line is doing its best Swiss cheese impression isn't a great idea if you're trying to win. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Like that was not the time to do that play for a lot of different reasons, but also because the O-line was doing a terrible job up until that point, right? Andrew Freeman writes, my hot take, they will be fine. 3-1 without Bernard, Tarrant, and Milano. Would rather lose by 25 now than by any amount in January. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Chad Labrie says, bad game all around. Offense has a few sustained drives, but couldn't stay synced up. Defense looked like they were lacking rest and simply looked the worst they have all season. Time to find someone to replace Bass. You know, John, it's way too early to do off-season, positional needs. And I know we never put kicker high up there past like 6 or 7 on the list of needs. I would bump it up this offseason. I think that, it hasn't cost the Bills yet, but couldn't you see a playoff game where where Tyler Bass absolutely costs us a game, extra point or field goal?
It depends. It's tough too. And they even mentioned on the broadcast that Justin Tucker's been having issues this year with field goals, and he's one of the best. If not, I think he
Looked
might
good
be
last
the best,
night.
actually. Like I think he doesn't he have the highest percentage all time, Justin Tucker?
I think so.
So yeah, I mean, these guys go through ups and downs and come back. So I guess if you're down for an extended period of time, I don't know. It's weird. He made that 50-yarder.
Yeah. It looked good. I mean, it wasn't just like he barely made it either.
Oh,
I mean,
it was down the middle, perfect yards to go.
Great distance, yeah.
And then the 48-yarder is like way to the left.
It was like a shank. It was like a golf shank, like where you barely hit it off or you top it and it just, dribbles around on the grass. Like that was, was his
Well,
version
I mean,
of it.
yeah. So like no matter what, you're going to want to better your team. It's just like, what are you going to prioritize more? You're not going to draft a kicker in the 3rd round. So
no.
But you're always going to want to bring somebody in to compete, even if you have a Justin Tucker. So,
dude, this is a year where I could absolutely see them like drafting a guy, like just drafting a guy. Like normally they don't draft kickers like Tyler Bass. I mean that's only happened like once or twice I can ever remember as a Bills
well, they drafted
fan.
that punter. What happened to that guy? He was pretty good, right? Like, yeah. Who's he play for now?
He plays on an undefeated team. That's all I know.
Interesting.
Okay, Yasinator. I have a good analogy for this game, by the way. It's something that happened to me recently in my life, which like is kind of a very good. It's almost, the more I think about it, it's almost a perfect analogy of this Bills Ravens game, but I'll save it for after. Don't let me forget, okay? Yasinator writes, the second Derrick Henry ripped off an 87-yard run, it was a long battle from the get-go. On to Houston. Yep. A lost battle, I would have said, too. Maybe that's what he meant to say. Big Mike says Ravens beat the Bills just a little bit worse than the coaching mistakes, bad plays, mental mistakes, missed opportunities, whatever else could be thrown at the team. If the Bills didn't beat themselves with all their problems, they would have at least been in this game. Yeah, it would have been competitive. Billy Mustafa says trick play was the nail in the coffin. Offense looks poor when it can't establish the run game. Can't help but feel like the offense needs a wind runner. A low-cost acquisition like Alec Pierce or more expensive Rashid Hashid could help us counter the defensive counter. Man, it's funny. We weren't talking about receivers being an issue before this game, right? And all of a sudden, we're talking about it, as an actual issue. Should we look at, it's so funny. One loss and we're like, should we be trading for a guy?
the perfect storm. Like there was like offensive line penalties, holding calls, ball drops. But was it that many drops? Like I know Kincaid and Coleman each dropped one. Was there more than that I missed?
No, I
But
can't think of one specifically
yeah,
besides those two.
between game
Maybe those are
planning
just
and just poor execution, it's just really bad all around and doesn't usually happen. That's why I'll give the Ravens credit. They're really great, but it's the odds of everything going wrong in one game, especially for this organization. We just talked about it.
feel
Like it's like 42 games since this has happened. So I'm not that worried.
no. It feels like the Murphy's Law of Bills games. John, I'm going to show you and the viewers on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or wherever you're streaming this. I want to show you this graph that JR Fortgang right on Twitter. It's at Throw the Damn Ball. He says he shows a graph of 2024 quarterbacks finding the open man, scrambles excluded through week 3. And here's a graph on the x-axis. You see average receiver separation. And then on the y-axis, you see percentage of throws to open receivers. So as you can see at the very top, the percentage of throws to open receivers, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Tua, Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, like pretty decent quarterbacks, right? Like that's a good stat for Josh Allen. Like a large percentage of the time he's throwing to open receivers, right? The problem with his graph, and when we originally looked at it before week 4, the problem with this graph is not that Josh Allen is throwing over 70%, 71% or so to open receivers. It's the fact that if you look at this average separation of wide receivers, there's less than 0.0 yards of average separation for Bills wide receivers. You see that, John? Going up and
Yeah,
down. I believe I'm reading this graph correctly. Let me know if I'm not. But if you look this way, like the
there's
average
only like
receiver separation, like Jalen Hurts has the most separation for.
and there's only 3 that are
What's that?
less than Allen's receivers.
Yeah, only 3 that are less than Allen receivers: Bryce Young, Kyler Murray, and Justin Fields. And I see this less as a Josh problem and more of a receiver problem as far as receiver separation. Like this is an issue. Like Bills receivers aren't getting a ton of separation. Now, is there a big difference between this, Josh Allen and maybe Justin Herbert or Aaron Rodgers or Matt Stafford? Like not a ton, but it's noticeable. It's bottom 4 in the NFL. The Bills were doing great yards after catch wise, but it's because Josh was finding the open receiver because these guys aren't getting open. I mean, if you look at those, just think of those Keon Coleman catches during the game, the 3 or whatever that he had. Like he was covered every time. He just made a great catch and Josh threw a great ball and the DB never looked back. Right? Like it wasn't like, oh, Keon like had like 4 yards of separation. No, he was completely covered. Josh was just forcing the ball because he had to do something to get the ball, get the game going. So he's trying to attack their corners. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting graph. I wanted to share that with Bills Mafia, our viewers on that. King Me Boxing says, it was embarrassing. I'm about to catch some heat tomorrow at work. Oh, well, I thought things were shifting on the third quarter up until the botched trick play and fumble. It is what it is. Hey, we all did. I thought so too. And then the Bills completely folded on every other drive after that. So yeah, John, did you hear? I know you have a lot of non-Bills fans as your coworkers. Did they give you hell for it?
Yes.
Well, you've probably been talking so much junk the first 3 weeks, right?
Yes.
If I know you, John talks some serious trash. Okay. We have a lot of great tweets. I can't read them all. Josh Allen's left arm says, Matt Collins getting more snaps and Keon needs to stop now. Let the rookie learn. Keon clearly has more potential. I hope that they're paying attention to Josh Allen and what he's saying there, because if I were Josh Allen, I would say, I would want him to have the receiver he has more chemistry with, give him those snaps. And I'm hoping that what it is just Josh saying that he's just not as comfortable giving Keon more snaps than Matt Collins. But on the outside looking in, it would make a lot more sense to have Keon get a lot more snaps because Matt Collins gets like 1 target a game, maybe 2. I mean, the talent and upside for Keon is just so much more at this point. So yeah, we'll see about that. Big R, our guy Big R says, this was the first real test against the Super Bowl contender and the Bills got whooped. Time to manage expectations, but with Josh Allen, Bills always got a puncher's chance. Absolutely. Lisa says, I had low expectations for this game. Ravens were desperate and we were cocky, mixed for the score we saw. I feel like coaches will make adjustments, and while the score is as horrible is this horrible loss? It's just a loss, one or many points. I will say this though, Ravens are dirty birds. Yeah. I already showed that a few times on the vidcast on the stream with the hits. I even showed that Josh Allen won in the pile, but this is now it's funny now that we just mentioned this. Buffalo Bills Herd says Josh Allen sliding early set the tone for cautious football just to be punched in the mouth and not respond. Yeah.
Not enough hurdles.
This is funny. Yeah. Pralines is EJ Tharp. I don't think we've sworn this episode, so I'm not going to read that one. That's a good take. If you're watching, you'll see it. So Michael Graham, I'm going to end on this one. Michael Graham says, this was Joe Brady's worst game. I don't know what his game plan was, but woof. Bobby Babich and Sean McDermott, not great, bud. How about we use 3 LBs for Derrick Henry? Ran it right down the middle. Absolutely no adjustment. It's an early game. We can't win them all, but wow, what a bad game. I mean, I think they only had 3 active linebackers on the roster. But yeah, why wasn't it Bale Inspector, Dorian Williams, and I mean, I can't even think of the third.
Nick Moreau.
Nicholas Morrow, I think. Nick Moreau, yeah. I mean, yeah. Why play nickel when they're just running it down your throat like that? Yeah. Excellent point. I love that Michael said that.
Yeah, it's tough. They
Let's
already
go
got
towards the bottom. Let's get some of these bottom. They already got what?
You skipped there for a second. But yeah, they already had 2 backup linebackers in.
Oh, yeah. Jeez. Lil Pacey says, someone needs to tell Babich, when you got a running quarterback in the pocket, a spy isn't a bad idea. Also, someone needs to McDumbass and Brady that needs to tell McDumbass and Brady that a lateral trick play towards the strong side is not a way to keep the momentum going. Oh, man. That was fun.
So, see, I'm not a big fan of the
Cool.
quarterback spies. I feel like it very rarely works. They just outrun the linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, they tried that with Bale Inspector, and that's we saw how well that went. I mean, he had that one play.
Good play when he was spying him, but and he's like a third stringer. But in general, like even like starting linebackers, you put a spy on whoever, it doesn't usually work. So I don't know why teams keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, this was just what it comes down to me is this was just a beatdown. I mean, they just lost on all 3 phases. It wasn't just one thing you can point to. I mean, the Bills weren't up for it. They just, whether it was, just emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever, they were not up to this game. And whatever happened early that, like someone mentioned, got punched in the mouth early. I mean, they were just reeling from that first punch, and they were just up against the ropes the entire game. They could not make it back from it. And when they started to get up off the ropes, they got right back onto them, right? So like they didn't even look like they had a puncher's chance, like someone else mentioned earlier. But yeah, I mean, not a great game. Obviously, we're hoping for better in the future. I think we will get better. I think the Bills are going to take this better to have this happen now than in week, 17 or something right before the playoffs. I mean, let it happen now against a good team. I still feel pretty confident going into the Texans game. The rain isn't, or the sky isn't falling. This isn't the end. So John, okay, my perfect analogy for this game in my real life. You ready?
Ready.
Okay. So my wife and I were planning a kayaking trip with the kids, and we live near the Erie Canal. So like it's a short drive away from us. We just got these 2 kayaks from my sister-in-law. She gave them to us. Really, really kind gesture. She had them. She's like, I'm not using them. You guys want them? We're like, yeah. My wife bought the rack holders, like the J hook rack holders that go on the luggage rack on our SUV. So we put those on, and we were doing this for the first time, right? Like, and of course, we're doing it for the first time on a Sunday, like when we have somewhere to go later. So like, of course, we don't give ourselves any time at all to like have any, error time, like, any issues with setting up or anything. So we have some straps that we've used for like a car carrier, but never kayaks. So you fit the kayaks into like the J hook and they kind of fit in there, but they're not strapped. And we have these straps that we've used for a car carrier. So we realize they're not quite long enough to go all the way around the kayak. So like, we'll get the back one on the back side, or the right one on the back side and the left one on the front side. So it's kind of this mishmash of like, bungee cords and straps that aren't quite big enough. And we're like, you know what? Honestly, we're just going down the street. The launch is like a quarter of a mile away. We're going to be going 30. It'll be fine, right? Like this is going to go okay. Like, I think we're fine. Like we have everything's strapped in, like we're good, right? This is like the Bills, right? Bills going into the Ravens game, like, man, we're doing well. Like this has worked before. We're going to use the same strategy, right? Like we've done before, just in a different place. And within, I want to say, less than a tenth of a mile, the kayaks just blow off the top of the car as we're driving down 30 miles an hour. Like, I'm turning the car to go on the main road, and I'm going super slow, making sure everything's fine. I have the moonroof open so I can see the kayaks, that they're still on top of the roof. And all of a sudden you hear whoosh, like it wasn't even like they just started to kind of creep off, and you're like, oh, we better pull over. And I hear my son go like, oh no, like he wanted to swear. My son doesn't swear. I could tell he wanted to swear, like, holy shit, like. And it was just like in slow motion, just disaster. And I'm like, oh my God, like, I hope I don't hit anyone. Like, I hope no one gets hurt. Like, I don't care about the kayaks. I'm just hoping I didn't cause a traffic accident behind me, right? So just insanity. Like
You should have
anything that
opened the moonroof and then had the strap go down in, holding them
yeah,
all
so I could
together,
have
and had somebody hold it.
I could have used it. Yeah, it's like extra support, right? That's a great John, where were you that day? I should have invited you along. But like anytime you go slow enough, you'll be fine. But it wasn't even that we were going fast. I think the wind just like they were put on so poorly, strapped to the rack of the SUV, that like the wind just going like 25 miles an hour just blew them off. Like just the air just took
Are you
it like
sure
a
you
sail.
strapped it to the SUV and you just wrapped the cord around the kayak? And
I just wrapped them to each other. That's not what you're supposed to do? Then they just became one big thing to blow off instead of two little things. It just became one big sail. No, so that was like the Bills Ravens game. It's like went into it like, I think we'll be fine, right? And then just got the kayaks knocked off my. And so like here we are on it's the main road, like where I live. It's not the main road, but it's one of them. So like cars are kind of like pulled over. This one guy, super nice guy. There are so many good people out there. Like he was just like, here, let me help you get the thing. I was like, oh, thank you. You don't have to do that. He's like, no, it's okay.
he's like,
It's
no,
okay.
let me show you how to strap this on.
He's doing it in front of my wife and my children, showing them what a real man is like. This is how you do it. The family's like, why isn't he our dad? Right? Like kids are like, geez. So yeah, it's pretty simple if you think about it. Like we didn't even YouTube it. Like we should have just taken the time. When you're in a rush, you're just looking back and you're like, why didn't I just take that, extra 5 minutes, right, to YouTube it?
And what
Like,
if people
we're
do
probably
it for
bigger.
YouTube?
And when my wife ordered it, I wasn't like, hey, did you get the straps to go with it? I didn't even think about that. I'm like, oh, we have straps for the car carrier. The car carrier is a little bit smaller than two kayaks sitting on their sides. So yeah, good times. Good times. Luckily, no one got hurt. We didn't get any damage to anyone else's vehicle or our vehicle. That was the most important thing. Again, like we'll be back at it. We're going to find a way to do it and we'll get it right. Just like the Bills will after this Ravens game. The season isn't over, but
Yeah, lessons learned.
Lessons learned. Yeah. I feel like I'm old enough that not a lot of good lessons are learned at our age. I need more good lessons. Not like why did I do that? That was so stupid.
Well, sometimes that's the lesson.
Thanks, John. Thanks, man.
It happens
Thanks,
to everybody.
It happens to the best of us, apparently. So, John, any final thoughts on this episode? By the way, it was so good to have you back, man. I miss talking to you. I mean, it's fun with Mike, and obviously I love having all three of you, but I miss talking Bills with you, man.
No, it was good. Of course, they lost this one, so it's not as good nearly. But yeah, here, quick question. Trivia question. What do you think the line is right now on the Bills-Texans game?
Oh, the Texans are favored, I bet, at this point. I want to say they're favored 4.5.
Incorrect.
The Bills favored?
Incorrect.
Oh, it's by more or less?
You tell me.
If I had to go anywhere, I'd say it's more than 4.5 then.
It's in Houston.
Yeah. So is it more or less?
No, it's less.
Oh, it's less than that. Oh, okay. 3. That's going to be exactly 3 then, I bet.
No.
3.5?
No.
2.5?
No.
Just tell me, for God's sake.
I'm looking at DraftKings right now.
Stop teasing me. You're like, I don't know.
Houston is -1.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Cool. Good to know. Good to know, John. Any final
4
thoughts
and
on
a
this one?
half. Jeez.
Well, dude, I thought the
Ravens are only favored by 2.5.
This is what I thought, man. After that drubbing, that there's so much recency bias in Vegas.
There
and
is
the
there
lines.
Is. Yeah.
And for good reason, not just because that's what they think might happen, is because of, fans are going to bet that way, right? So they want to get money on both sides. And I would have thought that the betting community would look at this game and be like, the Bills just got exposed. Like, they're not a good team.
Maybe it opened bigger, but then the sharps bet it down, and now it's I don't know.
I got to look at their Super Bowl odds. I might throw some more money on that if that went up at all.
More money on that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I put some money. You haven't put on any money on the Bills winning it all?
I haven't
Not
figured
even
out how to do
$5.
that. Betting savvy.
Dude, I am not betting savvy. That's why I'm making terrible Super Bowl bets. Just, the most unlikely of all bets, who's going to win the Super Bowl every year, is very tough to do. So, yeah. So, John, this was a pleasure. Thank you guys all for listening. Thank you guys all for watching. Oh, we got to do a giveaway soon. I have some jerseys and some posters, some signed Bills memorabilia I want to give away to listeners, to viewers. John, what do you think the best way to do that is? Because there are people that have left reviews on the podcast in the past on Apple Podcasts, so I could definitely do it with that. Also want to include like folks that are watching on YouTube, watching through Facebook or whatever. I want to say, like, if you comment on the video itself, like the live stream, or
wait, this is live?
Yeah. Freaking, we're doing it live, man. Yeah, we're doing this. No, this isn't live. This is pre-recorded, but it will be released as a stream live also.
That's good, because then you can edit out all the stupid shit we said, right?
Oh, yeah. All the stupid stuff we said will mostly be... You can't edit it out, everything, man. I don't have all the time in the world. I'd have to... I'd spend 5 hours for a 1-hour podcast, just trying to edit it out, all the stupid stuff we say. But, yeah. Yeah, so I want to give away something. I think I'm going to wait till the end of the season to do it, but here's the first way to do it. If you're listening through a podcast app, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and then use your like Twitter handle or social media handle or whatever, and I'll put that into a list. I already have like 30 names or 40 names or so from people that have left us reviews in the podcast in the past. So I'm just trying to figure out how we can do it for video streams, because you can't really track subscribers on YouTube like as easily, like, oh, we got, one new subscriber or 10 or 20, like that's kind of hard to do. But maybe if people leave comments in the like YouTube video or something like that, there's gotta be a way to do it. We'll figure it out. But we're going to start doing that. So leave those reviews, commenting, like, subscribe to all of that, so you can be ready for when we do the giveaway. But yeah, so signing off and for me, Nate, go Bills. This is one game. Next week is very winnable, and we'll talk